AITA for the one sentence that ruined our family holiday after they used me? My name is Hannah Brooks, I am 30 years old, and the truth is I was naive to believe her. That call came in at 3 in the morning London time. I was over there half asleep. When I saw my mom's name on the screen, I answered and saw her crying on a video call from the suburbs outside Chicago, her voice cracking, saying that we never see you anymore, that the family needs you, that the kids ask about you all the time. I woke up with a tight chest, still heavy with sleep. I listened to her talk about how much they missed me and guilt won me over. I traveled with a heavy suitcase, gifts for my nephews, and my body in pieces after an incredibly long flight, an endless layover, my phone almost out of battery, and that feeling of arriving smelling like reheated airplane coffee from the airport. I took an Uber straight there. Even so, there I was ringing the doorbell at my parents' house in a gated community in the suburbs outside Chicago, with a broken back and my head in another time zone. I even felt a tender hope thinking my mom was going to hug me like when I was a little girl. The door swung open. There was no "How was your trip?" There was no "Did you arrive safely?" There was no hug. My mom did not even look at my face. Her eyes went straight to my suitcase and she said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, "You are going to watch the kids. We are going on a family trip," just like that. Behind her appeared my brother Derek with a backpack slung over his shoulder and dark glasses as if he were about to head out on a road trip. He had the kids clinging to his arms, jumping, pulling at his jacket. He smiled with that one face and blurted out, "Hey, just do not wipe your boogers on your aunt. Yeah, she is jet-lagged." The kids laughed. He laughed. My parents laughed. I just stood there with my travel-flattened hair, the suitcase in my hand, and the plane ticket charge still fresh on the credit card that I had paid for myself. I did not scream, I did not cry, I just felt something strange inside, as if a part of me suddenly shut down. I smiled, left the suitcase at the entrance. I looked my mom straight in the eyes and said a single sentence. I did not come to babysit, I came to settle accounts. In that instant, the laughter stopped, the color drained from their faces, and my mom started repeating quietly, as if she could not believe it. "No, no, it cannot be." By the time I finished speaking, their dream trip no longer existed. The house they thought was safe began to shake, and I finally stopped being their free babysitter and their personal bank. My mom did not call me crying out of nowhere. 2 weeks before that early morning video call, she had already sent me screenshots with very expensive December prices, as if saying without saying, "Your dad and I could never afford something like this unless you help us out a little bit. Just this once, just this once." That was how all the favors started. When my dad needed a knee procedure and the expenses got complicated, I made a transfer. When Derek got stuck with his credit cards because according to him he was going to start an online business and it was almost taking off, I helped him consolidate his debt so the interest would not choke him. When the water heater broke down and the house's monthly mortgage payment fell behind, I sent money and then saw my mom uploading photos of a trendy breakfast with pretty pastries and expensive coffee, as if nothing happened. I lived in a tiny apartment in London. I cooked almost everything at home. I walked in the rain to get to work, and yet somehow I was paying their subscriptions, cell phone bills, direct debits, and emergencies for a house I did not even live in a country I no longer even belonged to in my daily life. This time, before buying my ticket, I stopped. I started saving everything. Every bank transfer, every receipt, every message of "Thank you, my love," and the classic, "We will pay you back when we get settled." 3 years of history, 3 years of just this once. And then I noticed something worse, an email from the bank. My name was linked to a home loan that I did not remember accepting like that. I started reading calmly with a cool head. It said there that I appeared as a co-signer. Years ago, my parents had asked me for a signature because, according to them, that way the bank would give them a better rate. "It is nothing, it is just paperwork, it will not even affect you." I trusted them, I signed, and since then, every time they fell short, I had been covering the shortfalls without realizing the size of the problem. While my mom cried on the video call saying "The kids miss you," I was sitting on my bed in London looking at my mobile banking and understanding something with a clarity that scared me. The only time my family treated me like part of the team was when a payment was due. I was about to say no. I was about to hang up and let them figure it out, but another idea hit me, one that gave me anger and strength at the same time. If they were capable of dragging me from so far away to use me as a babysitter and a credit card, Then I was capable of showing them what it looked like when I stopped playing their game. I bought the tickets, but I also scheduled a video call with a financial advisor. I downloaded 36 months of account statements and put together a simple document in a legal format. It was not a lawsuit, it was a reality check, and I also made a decision I had been keeping to myself. I was not going to return to London to keep paying from afar. Before that flight, I spoke at my job and asked for a temporary adjustment to work remotely and tie up loose ends from the States. It was not an impulse, it was the exit I had been planning for months. So when I was in that entryway with Derek laughing and my mom handing me my schedule as if I were an employee, I was no longer the tired, docile Hannah they knew. I brought my suitcase in, let the kids run around, and followed them into the kitchen. On the counter they had a printed itinerary, very pretty, like a promise. Photos of the hotel, schedules, big letters that said, "Family package." My mom touched the paper and said, "See, this is why we needed you to come, my love. The kids stay with you and we finally get to rest. A real trip." I looked at the hotel name and felt that click in my chest again, an all-inclusive resort in Cancun, the kind they show off on social media, and on her open phone a confirmation where you could see the last numbers of the card. The last 4 numbers were mine. They thought I arrived to become their live-in babysitter. I had traveled to do what I should have done years ago. I smiled. I asked everyone to sit in the dining room to get on the same page before they left. I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and settled in front of them as if I were about to present a project. My dad, Richard, sat at the head of the table, serious as if this were a formal family meeting. My mom, Carol, stood there clutching the itinerary in her hands. Derek was on his cell phone half listening. The kids were spinning around on the floor. I pulled the laptop closer so they could see it and said as calmly as I could, "Before you go anywhere, we need to talk about money." Derek made a face and blurted out, "Hannah, do not start right now." My dad muttered something about timing. My mom looked at me with that wounded face of hers and said, "My love, we have been under so much stress. Are you really going to start a fight right now?" I did not raise my voice. I opened a folder on the screen with a simple name, Brooks Family Home, and then I opened a spreadsheet with columns, dates, concepts, amounts, everything clear, no drama. I began. "Last March you called me because the house payment was late. I transferred $1,000 to you." I moved to the next line. "In June, Derek got stuck with his credit card due to business expenses. I sent him $2,250. Another one when the water heater broke. $750. Another when the car needed tires. $600. Another when the electric bill piled up. $400. And so I scrolled down the screen slowly so they could see how it all stacked up. Every month for 3 years there was always something. Then I pointed to another part, and that is without counting the subscriptions, the internet, the family plan, the recurring charges, without counting the emergencies that coincidentally arrive when there are sales or when you want to buy things. Derek straightened his back. He did not look amused anymore. My dad stopped playing tough and just stared blankly. My mom covered her mouth when she saw screenshots of her messages next to deposits for gas to go see your mom, and then photos of her all dressed up at a new place smiling. My dad clenched his jaw when he saw a payment I made for his knee procedure, and that same week a large charge for a new flat-screen television. My mom whispered, "This is not fair. You are making us look like bad people." I shook my head. "I am not making anyone look like anything. I am showing what happened and I am putting it in writing, so the lie that this was all a gift ends." I scrolled all the way to the bottom. There was a row in bold. The total. I stayed silent for a second just to let it sink in for them. "In 36 months, I said quietly, "I have sent you around $50,000. The dining room went mute. Derek blinked several times. My dad kept staring at a spot on the wall, as if his mind could not grasp it. My mom started repeating almost without a voice, No, that cannot be. It cannot be," as if saying it many times would make the numbers move. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small stack of printed pages. I placed it on the table next to the Cancun itinerary. "This is a simple agreement. It is not a lawsuit. It is not a court order. It is an acknowledgement of debt." Derek grabbed it and started reading. My mom leaned in nervously. "It just says that you acknowledge that this money was not a gift and that you are going to start paying Even if it is a little bit, whatever you can, but pay. My dad finally exploded with that voice of authority he always used to put me in my place. We are family. You do not charge family like this. What are you going to do? Sue us? I looked at him without moving. Family does not put their daughter on a loan and hide it. Family does not use their daughter's money to live a life they cannot afford, and then go out and say the daughter abandoned them. My mom flinched as if she had been physically hurt. Derek left the papers on the table, his voice devoid of mockery. This is wrong. I cannot pay that. No one can. I leaned back in my chair. I know. I do not expect you to pay it all at once. But this story where you are the victims and I am the bad guy for living far away is over. My gaze drifted to the screen and I said something I had been holding on to for years. If any neighbor, any cousin, or anyone on Facebook ever says again that I left you with nothing, I am going to show this. All of it, every transfer, every charge. Every time you went out for fun, knowing I was going to cover the basics. My mom shook her head over and over in desperation. No, no, no. You would not do that. You are going to humiliate us. I breathed softly. I will not do it if you stop lying. And then I opened another tab, the hotel confirmation, names, dates, and at the bottom the last numbers of the card. My card. I looked up and said with the same calm, about the trip. You better sit down properly for this. My dad frowned. What are you talking about? I pointed to a line on the screen. Cancelled. 3 days ago I called the hotel and the airline. Since it is under my name and it was paid with my card, I could do it. The package is cancelled. The money returned as a credit balance. My dad stood up abruptly, as if standing could change what he was reading. You had no right. Those are our tickets. I did not move. They were bought with my money, the right was mine. And before he could start another speech, I opened the next window, an email from the bank. There were 2 names there, my dad's and mine, linked to the loan. My dad turned pale. My mom let out, Hannah, please. That sounded like real fear, not manipulation. That was just paperwork, she murmured. We told you it did not affect you. I swallowed hard. You told me it was just a formality. You told me nothing would happen, but every time you fall behind, it hits me too, my record, my credit score, my life. I clicked a button and a video call opened. In the corner appeared my financial advisor's face from her office. Hello, Hannah, she said. Is this still a good time? I moved the laptop so they could see her. Perfect, I replied. Do you remember what I told you about my family? My dad quietly with rage asked, Who is this? I answered without turning to look at him. It is the person who explained to me what it means to be tied into this loan, and what options I have now that I am not going to keep plugging holes. The advisor greeted them politely and was direct. With clear words, she explained that my name was tied to that debt, that the late payments and shortfalls affected my record, and that I could request a review of my situation with the bank. That to remove my name they would have to be able to sustain the loan on their own, restructure or refinance, and that if they did not meet the requirements the bank was going to demand solutions. My mom started shaking. You cannot do that, she said with a broken voice. We cannot move. The advisor was gentle, without aggression. You will have to discuss that with the bank, ma'am. What I can say is that Hannah is not obligated to keep her name on a loan that does not benefit her, especially if she has been covering the differences for years. I said thank you and ended the call. My heart was beating so fast I felt the pressure in my mouth. The dining room felt smaller. My dad lunged at me with his gaze. You are going to leave your parents out on the street over some numbers. I looked at him coldly. I am not going to let you play with my future while you act like I owe you my life. I took a breath and continued. If you could pay for a trip when you thought I was going to stay and babysit, then you can also sit down with the bank and figure out how you are going to sustain your own house. I pulled out a folded sheet of paper. This is my notice that I am going to stop all the direct debits I had linked to this house. Starting today, the bank will contact you. My mom let out a choked sound. But that is where the grocery money comes from. That is how we pay the bills. I nodded slowly. Well, now you are going to handle it like any adult, with your income, with your budget, and with consequences when you spend what you do not have. I opened another tab. A list of automatic payments, mortgage supplement, electricity, internet, platforms, phone bills, grocery deliveries, a car payment. My name was next to payer on almost everything. As of today, I said and placed the cursor over the buttons. It is over. Derek finally spoke in panic. Hannah, you cannot just cut everything off like this. Give us time. I can work more. Really, do not do this to us. I looked at him without hatred, but without softness. You are 34 years old. You have 2 kids. You should have been doing that for years, without waiting for me as a safety net. Derek looked down. For a second I saw something resembling shame, and I, for a second, was about to soften. I almost returned to my usual role. The one who fixes things, the one who stays quiet, the one who swallows her anger and then resolves it with a transfer. But I remembered the door, how they laughed, how my mom said, "You are going to watch the kids," as if I were a hired service. And that soft part of me closed up again. I started canceling them one by one. The confirmation emails started arriving. My mom was breathing fast, as if she were going to pass out. My dad sat there staring into nothing. "This is cruel," he muttered. "You are punishing us." I shook my head. "No, I am stepping out of a role you put me in without asking, and I am giving you the chance to be honest about what you can actually afford." I closed the laptop and stood up. My legs were shaking, but I held myself together. "And after this," I said, already with the suitcase in hand, "if you decide to tell people that I abandoned you, remember that I have every receipt." I took a breath and added more quietly, "You wanted a vacation. Maybe this is the closest thing to one. A vacation from believing I am your solution for everything." My dad stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. "If you leave after your little stunt, do not even think about coming back," he said. "You are not welcome here if you come to throw money in our faces." My mom tried to touch my arm. "Richard, calm down, we can talk about it." But she did not step in front. She did not defend me. She only tried to calm everything down so nothing would change. Derek stayed quiet, looking at the floor. I stood in the hallway doorway with my hand on the suitcase handle, my whole body shaking. A part of me wanted to drop everything and ask for forgiveness, like always. Instead, I stood up straight and said, "You were the ones who decided my value here is measured by what I pay. If I am not welcome without my card, then I was never truly welcome." My dad pointed to the door. "Get out," he said, "and do not come crying when life blows up in your face." I almost laughed, but it was one of those dry laughs born out of anger. Life was not what was blowing up in my face, it was that kitchen. I walked out. It was getting late and the December cold felt harsher on my face. I closed the door and no one followed me. No one called my name. The only thing you could hear was the kids fighting over a cartoon in the living room, clueless that their trip had just disappeared. I ordered an Uber and dragged my suitcase to the sidewalk. The driver loaded my bag and asked, "Where are we going?" I gave him an address my parents did not know. With normal traffic, that route from the suburbs could take an hour. That night, past rush hour, it took me a little under 40 minutes. 6 months earlier, after yet another early morning of transfers and guilt, I had used my savings and my stable user experience design salary to make a down payment on a tiny apartment. I used to tell my family that maybe someday I would move back to the States, but the truth was I had already signed. My plan was to move little by little without making a scene, while I settled my life and detached myself from their finances without blowing everything up. That night I understood there was no gentle way. When the car stopped in front of the glass and concrete building, it felt unreal. I scanned my key fob, crossed the lobby I barely knew, went up the elevator and reached my floor. When I opened the door, the place smelled like fresh paint and emptiness. It did not smell like someone else's food. It did not smell like stress. It did not smell like urgency, it smelled like mine. I left my suitcase in the middle of the living room and stood there looking at the city lights through the window. For the first time in years, my phone was not vibrating with messages like, "Can you send us something to hold us over?" Or "The payment got declined, can you fix it?" I opened my mobile banking app and checked what I was still paying for that was not even in my name. I started canceling. Family subscriptions, cloud storage, game charges, shared plans, one by one. Every confirmation felt like cutting a string I had kept tied around my chest for too long. I made a simple coffee in my almost empty kitchen and sat on the floor because I still did not have a sofa. There was silence, and in that silence came the doubts. What if I went too far? What if they really cannot pay the electric bill? What if I really am the selfish daughter my dad claims I am? Then I remembered the door. I remembered my mom looking at my suitcase as if I were a delivered package. I remembered Derek making jokes and everyone laughing, certain that I was going to fall right into my place. And underneath the fear and guilt, for the first time in years, something new settled in. A thin, quiet peace. They were going to feel my absence. Of course, bills, late fees, calls would start coming in. The life they had built on top of my invisible money was going to crumble, but that night in that small apartment, I had no one to rescue but myself. The first signs that my decisions were actually making an impact did not come from a phone call, they came from Facebook. About a week later, my friend Amanda sent me a screenshot with a message. "Hey, did you see this?" It was my dad's profile. His name above a huge dramatic text, the kind that seeks applause. He did not mention me by name, but he did not need to. He wrote that there are children who forget who raised them as soon as they get a nice job abroad, that he and my mom had been left with nothing right before Christmas. My daughter came from London and decided that money was more important than blood. He wrote, "Pray for us." The comments were worse. People who had known me since I was a teenager saying, "How sad, young people do not value family anymore. You gave her everything." Someone even put, "Well, set up a fundraiser, I will share it." My stomach twisted. He was doing exactly what I warned him about. Playing the victim, turning me into the villain, rewriting history in front of an audience that did not know how many times I had silently funded their lives. I paced around my living room with my phone in my hand, tempted to call him, tempted to go beg him to delete it, tempted to reactivate a payment, anything just to end the humiliation. The old version of me was desperate to fix it. Then I thought about my spreadsheet, the email from the bank, the screenshots, that door, and the ticket. Instead of calling him, I opened my email and found the conversation with my financial advisor. I told her about the post. I told her my family had been using my money for years while playing the martyrs. And I asked her a simple question. Is there anything else I should do to protect myself now that I have cut them off? She replied calmly. She told me to document everything, to save receipts, to organize the information well, and she reminded me of something simple. The most important thing was for the bank to have the correct data on who was covering what, so my name would not continue bearing the consequences of someone else's late payments. She did not talk to me about revenge, she talked about order. In the following weeks, while my dad continued with his posts about ingratitude and betrayal, envelopes started arriving at my parents' house. I did not see them, but my mom's messages told the whole story. One morning she wrote me, "Did you talk to the bank?" A letter arrived. They want to update the loan information. Another day, early messages poured in one after another. I am nervous. A notice came to update data. What is going on? I never said everything was fine. I said I was not going to keep covering everything up in the dark anymore. The bank wanted updated paperwork. The companies wanted full payments, not the patches I would sneak in at the end like an invisible hand. The comfortable fog they had lived in began to lift, and there was nothing left to hide behind except the reality of what they could afford with their own money. One day, Derek sent me a message to meet at a coffee shop near my building. When he arrived, he looked different. Without that inflated attitude, he had dark circles under his eyes, an unkempt beard, and a delivery driver backpack slung across his shoulder. He sat across from me and blurted out directly, "Dad needs to stop writing nonsense on the internet. He is looking bad, he is dragging Mom down, and honestly me too." He rubbed his face and continued without beating around the bush. "And all this, the letters, the calls. You did something, right?" I took a sip of coffee. I let him feel the discomfort for a second and answered, "What I did was stop pretending we were all being honest. I talked to people who know about this, and I made sure my name was not going to sink with a ship I am not steering." Derek looked down, then admitted almost with shame that he had picked up more shifts, that he sold things, that he moved the kids to a smaller room, that he was cutting expenses. "It is awful," he said. "But for the first time I am seeing what things really cost. Groceries, gas, school, everything. Before, I just knew that if things got ugly, someone would send you a message. Meanwhile, from what I was told, my mom started selling handbags, decor items, almost new jewelry, as if having all that had been an accident. And the big screen my dad bought after his knee procedure, the one he defended as being for his recovery, disappeared from the living room and family photos. It was replaced by an old television, the kind they keep in storage. Then came what was already a long time coming. One gray morning, my dad's car was repossessed for lack of payments. It was not an overnight thing. They had been dragging months behind. The very thing they criticized when it happened to a neighbor now happened on their own sidewalk. And even so, my dad never called to say sorry. He never made a post telling the truth. He just kept dropping phrases on the internet like little pebbles, waiting for me to feel guilty. I did not respond publicly. I did not get into fights in the comments. I did not create my own drama with screenshots. Even though a part of me wanted to, I did not need to. I had my receipts, I had my advisor, I had my credit history starting to separate from theirs, and I had distance. Every time I heard he was still telling his story of the cold daughter, my only thought was that if they saw a single page of that spreadsheet, they would not ask me why I left. They would ask me how I endured so much. Months passed. By the time the next December rolled around, my parents' house felt like another universe, and so did mine. I found out through random photos. My mom at a discount store without her usual places. My nephews in a small apartment without a yard, friends asking, "Is everything okay?" I did not get involved. I focused on my work, on building my life, on furnishing my apartment little by little. I bought a second-hand couch, a tiny tree, and some cheap little lights that somehow still made the place look warmer than I thought possible. And one cloudy Tuesday in December, with that damp cold that seeps into your bones, there was a knock on my door. When I looked through the peephole, my chest tightened. It was my mom. She looked smaller, without a full face of makeup, without perfect hair. She was clutching a reusable bag to her chest like a shield. I opened the door for her. She walked in slowly and stood in the middle of my living room, looking at the used couch, the window, the tiny tree with 3 mismatched ornaments. She said very quietly, "I did not know you lived like this." She looked at me as if she had truly never imagined me as a real person. "I always pictured you in something bigger, prettier." I shrugged. This is what I can afford when I am not paying for 2 houses. It hurt her. It showed on her face. She opened the bag and took out an envelope. Inside was a deposit slip. It was nowhere near $50,000, not even a quarter, but it was something. "It is from selling things," she said quickly with shiny eyes. "Bags, jewelry, that table you hated. And I have taken extra hours at the office. It is not much, but it is a start." I stared at the receipt without moving. It was not the amount, it was my mom, the same one who had acted for years as if my money came out of nowhere, standing in my small living room, admitting with a red face that she had treated me like an ATM. She sat on the edge of the couch and started to cry. This time it was not the loud sobbing from the late-night video call. It was a silent, broken cry, like someone who can no longer keep up the act. "Your dad keeps saying you betrayed him," she murmured. "He says you think you are better, that you left us out of pride, but I cannot keep repeating it anymore." She looked up. "Not after seeing those papers. Not after everything that came crashing down when you stopped paying. We used you, Hannah. I used you." I sat next to her, leaving some space between us. "I am not asking you to hate him," I told her. "I am asking you to stop letting him change the story, just so he does not have to feel guilty." Carol nodded, and for the first time she said something to me that actually carried weight. "I already told him. I told him I will not keep telling that story, that if he is going to speak, he needs to speak the truth. And he got mad, but I do not care anymore." She wiped her face. "Derek is working," she added. "Really working. Long shifts. He moved to a smaller place. The kids share a room, but it is a place he is paying for." She paused, as if it brought her both shame and pride at the same time. "He told me to tell you. Thank you for that spreadsheet." I let out a short, surprised laugh. "I did not make it for him," I replied. "I made it for me." My mom looked at me carefully and asked, "Do you think someday we can have a Christmas where you come over and we just have dinner? Without talking about money, without hidden tabs. Just us." My throat tightened. "Maybe," I said. But only if everyone in that house understands that I am no longer their safety net. If I go, it is because I want to, not because a payment is past due. Carol nodded again, stood up and hugged me. A real hug, the kind I had been waiting for years. When she left, I put the receipt in a drawer. I did not move it right away. I just needed to see for once that the money was going in the opposite direction. From my dad, the last thing I heard was another vague text on Facebook about the family that turns its back on you. I did not answer. I muted him. And one day, unceremoniously, I blocked him. It did not feel like slamming a door. It felt like closing a wound I no longer wanted to heal if I kept touching it. That Christmas Eve, I sat alone on my used couch with the little tree lit up and a mug of hot chocolate in my hands. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel obligated to be somewhere else. No flights, no babysitting shifts, no emergency transfers. Just silence. Just mine. I learned something that took me years to understand. Family does not stop being family just because you say no. The people who truly love you will, sooner or later, adjust to your boundaries. The ones who were only there for what you gave will call you selfish the second you stop bleeding out for them. It hurts, it is scary. Sometimes it feels lonely. But sometimes distance is the only thing that saves you from sinking into other people's bad decisions. Comment. I hope this story gave you some space to reflect on your own life. I've learned that protecting our peace is never selfish. You have every right to set clear boundaries with the people around you. Being generous is beautiful, but it should never come at the expense of your self-respect. Healing often starts the moment we decide to stop enabling unhealthy patterns. Taking responsibility for your own well-being is one of the most empowering choices you can make. It's okay to love your family while still choosing yourself. I truly believe each of us deserves relationships built on mutual respect. Take some time to think about where you might need to draw a firmer line in your life. Remember, choosing your peace is an act of courage and self-love. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.